Welcome to a special edition of Watch Me Code. In this episode, I'm going to answer a question that somebody emailed me about one of the particular emails in my email course for mastering the 5 rules of JavaScript this. So this person emails me and asks specifically about the .apply method on functions, and they want to know what would happen if they pass more than 2 arguments to .apply. Now, as you may or may not know, the .apply method of a function allows you to specify the context as well as any parameters that you want to calling a function. And you can find out more information about that inside of my 5-day email course on mastering JavaScript this. Just head over to derekbailey.com/email courses and you'll be able to find a link to this page here where you can get that information. Now specifically, this person wanted to know if they would get an error when they passed in more than 2 parameters to the apply method on a function. And as you can see in the output that they've produced here for me in this email, they're getting undefined as the return value. Now this actually is the correct return value because their function is not actually doing anything. It's not returning a value, it's not doing anything else. So they're just getting undefined as the return result inside of the console of Node. And passing in multiple parameters really isn't going to throw an error, but it may not exactly do what you would expect either. So I wanted to demonstrate what's going on here inside of a quick Node.js console. I'm going to start by creating a little function that's going to do at least something here. I'll define a function. I'll start by defining a function and I'll just call it A. I'm not going to pass any arguments directly into it, but I am going to use the JavaScript arguments parameter that is built into every function. So I'm going to say console.log arguments. And I'm also going to use this because .apply allows us to specify what this is. So I'm going to say console.log this. After that, I'm simply going to return a value. I'll return 1 in this case. So this will give us insight into all of the arguments that are passed into this function, the value of this, and also give us a return value so we can see what happens if we do have a return value. So now that I have A, I need to apply it in order to see what's going on. If I call a.apply and I pass in an object literal, and then I pass in an array of 1, 2, 3, this is going to produce a couple of different results. The first thing it gives us is the list of arguments and their position that they were passed in. So the first argument, index 0, is 1, index 1 is 2, index 2 is 3, because I passed in 1, 2, 3. The second thing that it outputs is this, which I passed in as the first argument of .apply, and as you can see, it is just an object literal. And finally, it returned 1, which gave me a return value of 1. Now this is slightly different from what this person had emailed to me, because as you can see, the function that they declared didn't actually do anything, and so it produced an undefined value on the output. Now the real question that they asked was what happens if you pass in more than 2 parameters, because I've only really passed in 2 parameters right here. I passed in the empty object literal, and I passed in an array of values right here. So let's see what happens if I apply more than 1 value here. I'll put in A, B, C, and D at this point. And when I run this, I get the exact same output that I did previously, because the .apply method is essentially ignoring all of the extra parameters that I passed in at the end. And this is illustrating one of the key concepts in JavaScript functions. You can pass in any number of arguments that you want to any function that you want in JavaScript. There's no real need for you to pass in an exact number of parameters when you're calling a function. If you pass in more parameters than are expected, the function may not use them at all, which is what's happening in this case. If you don't pass in enough parameters, however, you may end up running into some errors. Now in the case of my A function, if I just call A by itself as a normal function call, we're going to end up getting a few things logged out to the console here, specifically when it comes to logging this, because this actually did have a value in this case. The first thing that I got, though, was an empty list of arguments that were passed in, and then I got a value of this, which is going to be the default value of this inside of Node.js. Finally, I got the return value of 1 as well. So in my case, in this really simple example, not passing any parameters to my function didn't produce an error, but there are a lot of cases, in fact most cases I would guess, when you're writing a function, if you don't receive any parameters, or if you see or if you receive the wrong types of parameters, or if there's just something wrong with the parameters that you're passing into a function, you're probably going to get an error. And this is both a blessing and a curse in JavaScript, I think. You can end up in situations where you can take advantage of this flexibility and have the ability to pass in whatever arguments you want, and different types of arguments even, or you can also run into trouble if you don't pass in the right number of arguments or the correct arguments. So I hope that helps to answer this question a little bit. And if you're interested in more information about JavaScript's this and how the apply method will allow you to change the value of this inside of a function, head over to derekbailey.com/email courses, and you'll find a link to my 5 rules for mastering JavaScript this.